The encrypted files glowed on the screen in front of her, each one a nail in the coffin of everything Nia thought she knew. Project Coldfront, Bioengineered Storm System, her research data flagged for deletion, weather manipulation schematics, and there, in the corner of the monitor, a transmission she wasn't supposed to hear. Dr. Mbele poses a significant liability. The Arctic is dangerous. Accidents happen. Her hands trembled as the door behind her opened. Ethan stood there, the man she'd trusted, the man she'd almost loved, his face pale in the blue light of the servers. "How much did you see?" he asked quietly. "Everything." She'd seen everything. The storm that trapped them here wasn't an act of God. It was his. And now, miles from civilization in the most hostile place on Earth, Nia realized she might never leave this place alive. But that wasn't how their story began. The helicopter blades chopped through the Arctic wind like a knife through frozen butter. Dr. Nia Mbele pressed her face against the small window, watching the world below transform into an endless blanket of white. The research base appeared as a tiny cluster of buildings, barely visible through the swirling snow that seemed to come at them from every direction. Her stomach churned, though she couldn't tell if it was from the turbulence or the growing realization of just how isolated this place truly was. Cape Town felt like another planet now, not just another continent. The helicopter touched down with a jarring thud. Nia grabbed her equipment bags and pushed open the door, immediately hit by a wall of cold that stole her breath. The wind screamed in her ears as she stumbled toward the nearest building, her boots crunching through knee-deep snow. Inside, chaos greeted her. People rushed past carrying boxes, their faces tight with urgency. A woman with a radio shouted coordinates into her headset, while two men wrestled a generator through a narrow hallway. "Dr. Mbele?" A quiet voice cut through the noise. Nia turned to find a man standing perfectly still amid the chaos, like a rock in a rushing river. He was tall, with dark hair that needed a trim and gray eyes that studied her with an intensity that made her shift her weight. "That's me," she said, extending a hand. "You can call me Naya." Ethan Walker. His handshake was brief, his palm calloused. "I'm the systems engineer." "Is it always this?" Naya gestured at the frantic activity around them. "Only when a Category 5 storm is about to hit." His expression didn't change, making it impossible to tell if he was joking. "Everyone's evacuating. Last flight out leaves in 2 hours." Nia's heart sank. "But I just got here. My research will still be here when the storm passes." Ethan's gaze shifted to the window, where the sky had darkened to a bruised purple. "You should be on that helicopter." "What about you?" Naya asked, noticing he wasn't carrying any bags. "Someone has to keep the lights on." She couldn't tell if that was bravery or stupidity. Maybe both. Something about his calm certainty in the face of disaster both annoyed and fascinated her. He seemed less like a person and more like another piece of equipment, functional, efficient, emotionless. "I'll take my chances," Nia found herself saying, surprising even herself. "I didn't travel 9,000 kilometers to turn back before I've even started." For the first time, something flickered in Ethan's expression. Not quite approval, but perhaps a hint of respect. Or maybe it was concern. With him, she honestly couldn't tell. "Your funeral," he said, then walked away before she could respond. The silence after the last helicopter departed felt like a living thing. Nia stood at the window of the communal dining hall, watching the blinking lights disappear into the darkening sky. Then, there was nothing but white and gray, the horizon erased completely by the advancing storm. "Hungry?" She jumped at Ethan's voice. He stood in the doorway of the small kitchen, holding 2 bowls of something that steamed in the cold air. "Starving, actually," Naya admitted, joining him at one of the long tables. The stew was better than she expected, hearty and warm, with chunks of real vegetables. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds their spoons against the bowls and the increasing howl of wind outside. "So," Naya tried again, "where are you from?" "Around." Ethan didn't look up from his bowl. "That's specific. What about you? South Africa, right? Your accent—" "Cape Town," Nia said, recognizing the deflection but playing along anyway. "Born and raised. My father was a climate scientist. He used to take me to see the glaciers in the Western Cape when I was little, before they started disappearing." She smiled at the memory. I think that's when I fell in love with ice. Sounds strange, doesn't it? No? Ethan finally met her eyes. It sounds like you found something worth caring about. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Maybe there was a real person under that stoic exterior after all. What about you? She pressed gently. What made you want to work in places like this? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. I like places where things are simple, where the rules are clear. He paused. People are complicated. Ice and machines make sense. Before Naya could respond, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the room plunged into darkness. Stay still, Ethan said calmly. She heard him moving, heard a drawer open. Then a flashlight clicked on, casting dancing shadows across the walls. In the sudden darkness, Nia had reached out instinctively, and her hand landed on something warm and solid. Ethan's hand. They both froze. The touch lasted only a second before they both pulled away, but Nia felt the electricity of it travel up her arm. Generator backup should kick in any second, Ethan said, his voice carefully neutral. The lights returned, harsh and bright after the darkness. Ethan stood and collected their bowls, not meeting her eyes. You should get some rest. Long day tomorrow. Nia watched him disappear into the kitchen, her hand still tingling where they'd touched. By day 4, Nia was climbing the walls with restlessness. The storm raged outside with no signs of stopping, and she'd exhausted every surface-level task she could do without accessing her primary equipment. I need to get to the lower research levels, she announced at breakfast. Ethan looked up from his tablet. Not safe. The tunnels flood during storms sometimes. My core samples are down there. My whole reason for being here. I can't just sit around playing cards for 2 weeks. You play cards? No, but I'd learn if it meant I could do something other than stare at walls. Naya leaned forward. Please, I'll follow every safety protocol. You can come with me if you're worried. Something in her desperation must have gotten through to him, because Ethan sighed and set down his tablet. Fine. But we go together, and if I say we leave, we leave. No arguments. 20 minutes later, they were descending into the ice caves beneath the base. Nia had seen pictures, had read descriptions, but nothing prepared her for the reality. The tunnels glowed with an ethereal blue light, the ice walls so clear in places she could see layers of history compressed within them. Ancient air bubbles, volcanic ash from eruptions thousands of years ago, the story of Earth's climate written in frozen water. This is incredible, she breathed, running her gloved hand along the wall. Look at this. You can see the compression patterns. Each layer represents years, sometimes decades. It's like reading a book written by the planet itself. When she looked back at Ethan, she was surprised to find him staring at the ice with something like wonder on his usually impassive face. It's beautiful, he said quietly. I've been down here dozens of times and never really looked at it. That's the difference between us, Naya said with a smile. You see a tunnel. I see a time machine. They spent an hour in the caves, with Nia explaining the science while Ethan asked increasingly thoughtful questions. For the first time, she saw him relax, his shoulders dropping from their usual tense set. He had a nice smile, she noticed. He should use it more often. As they headed back, Naya noticed a corridor sealed off with a heavy door. What's down there? The change in Ethan was immediate. His face closed off, the warmth vanishing like it had never existed. Engineering. Nothing you need to worry about. I wasn't worried, I was curious. Same thing. He walked past her toward the elevator. We should head up. The rest of the trip back was silent, and Nia felt the chill between them had nothing to do with the temperature. By the time they reached the surface, she was frustrated and confused. What had she said wrong? That night, she found a mug of hot chocolate outside her door, with a note scrawled on a piece of paper. Sorry, I'm shit at small talk. E. Despite herself, Nia smiled. Maybe getting to know Ethan Walker was going to be like studying ice, slow work that required patience but potentially rewarding. She kept the note. By the end of the first week, they'd fallen into a rhythm that felt almost comfortable. Mornings meant coffee in the kitchen. Naya took hers with milk and sugar. Ethan drank his black and strong enough to strip paint. They'd share the handful of news updates that trickled through the patchy communications, read in silence, then drift to their separate tasks. But the drift never lasted long. Ethan would appear in her makeshift lab with a tool she needed, or to check that her equipment was handling the power fluctuations. Nia would find him in the control room and ask questions about how the life support systems worked. Just in case, she said, though they both knew it was more than that. "Show me how to read this," she said one afternoon, pointing at a screen full of numbers and graphs. "Why? This is my job. What if something happens to you?" Nia kept her tone light, but they both felt the weight of the question. They were alone in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Backup plans weren't paranoia, they were survival. Ethan taught her the systems. Nia taught him to read ice cores, showing him how to identify the layers, how to extract samples without contamination. Their hands would brush passing tools, their shoulders would touch as they leaned over shared screens. Neither of them pulled away as quickly as they had before. They shared music during evening meals. Nia introduced him to Afrobeats and smooth jazz. Ethan countered with indie folk and melancholic alternative rock. They argued good-naturedly about whether music should make you want to dance or cry. "Why not both?" Nia suggested, and played him a song that somehow managed to do exactly that. One evening, Ethan found her frowning at a computer terminal in the commons area. "Problem?" he asked. "These files." Nia pointed at the screen. "They're encrypted. I can see them in the directory but can't access them. Is that normal?" Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "Probably just system administrative files, nothing important." He was lying. Nia knew it with the same instinct that let her read ice formations, but she also knew that pushing would shut him down completely, so she let it go, for now. "If you say so," she said lightly and changed the subject. The storm that hit on day 14 made all the previous weather look like a light flurry. The base groaned and shuddered like a living thing in pain. Warning lights flashed in the hallways. The wind didn't howl, it screamed. Nia sat on the floor of her quarters, wrapped in every blanket she owned, trying to convince herself that the walls weren't slowly closing in. She'd never told anyone about the claustrophobia that had haunted her since childhood. It was a shameful secret for someone who'd chosen to work in remote, enclosed spaces. She'd learned to manage it, to breathe through it, to hide it. But tonight, with the base creaking like it might tear apart at any moment, with hundreds of miles of empty ice in every direction, the panic was winning. The knock on her door made her jump. "Nia," Ethan's voice, "you okay?" "Fine," she called back, hating how her voice shook. The door opened anyway. Ethan stood there with a flashlight and a blanket, taking in her pale face and wide eyes with one quick glance. "You're not fine," he said simply, and stepped inside, closing the door against the screaming wind. "I said I'm Nia." He sat down on the floor beside her, not touching, but close. "You don't have to pretend with me." Something about his quiet certainty broke through her defenses. "I hate small spaces," she admitted. "Always have. Stupid, right? For someone who chose this career." "Not stupid, human." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "My dad used to lock me in closets when he was drunk. I was maybe 6, 7 years old. Dark spaces, small spaces, they still get to me sometimes." Nia turned to look at him, shocked that he'd shared something so personal. His face was carefully neutral, but she could see the old pain in his eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "It was a long time ago." He shifted slightly, and his shoulder pressed against hers, warm and solid. "The point is, we're all running from something. Maybe that's why we end up in places like this. The ice is honest. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not." "Is that why you're here?" Nia asked. "Running from something?" "Maybe. Or running toward something." He met her eyes. "Haven't figured out which yet." They sat there as the storm raged, shoulders touching, sharing warmth and silence, and something neither of them was quite ready to name. Eventually, exhaustion won, and Nia's head dropped onto his shoulder. She felt him go still, then carefully, like he might scare her away, he let his cheek rest against her hair. When Nia woke in the early morning light, she was still wrapped in blankets on the floor, but now she was also wrapped in Ethan's arms. He was asleep, his breathing deep and even, his face younger and less guarded in rest. she should move. She knew she should. But instead, she let herself have this moment, this small pocket of warmth in the endless cold. "Come on," Naya said, tugging on Ethan's sleeve. "The storm's finally cleared. We might actually see stars tonight. It's still -40 out there, which is practically tropical by Arctic standards. Don't be boring." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Nobody's ever called me boring before." "Then don't start now," she grinned. "Please? I haven't seen the sky in 2 weeks. I'm starting to forget what space looks like." 10 minutes later, they stood on the observation deck, tethered to the railing by safety lines, staring up at a sky that made Nia's breath catch. The aurora borealis danced overhead, in waves of green and violet, rippling like a curtain caught in a celestial breeze. "It's charged particles from the sun hitting Earth's magnetic field," Nia said, her voice full of wonder despite the scientific explanation. "But knowing how it works doesn't make it any less magical." She looked over at Ethan and found him staring at her instead of the sky. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You," he said simply. "You're incredible. The way you see the world, like everything is a miracle worth celebrating. How do you do that?" Nia's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't know. I guess I learned early that life's too short to be cynical about beauty." They were close now, she realized. When had they moved so close? She could see the aurora reflected in his eyes, could see the frost forming on his eyelashes, could see the exact moment when his gaze dropped to her lips. "Nia," he said, and it sounded like a question, a prayer, a warning all at once. His gloved hand came up to cup her cheek through the thermal mask. She leaned into the touch and he was leaning in too, and his radio crackled to life, making them both jump. "Walker, come in. This is command. Status update required." The voice was broken by static, but Nia heard the words clearly enough. "Remind you of timeline. Evidence must be eliminated." Ethan jerked back like he'd been burned. His face went carefully blank, that mask she'd come to recognize slamming down between them. "We should go in," he said, his voice flat. "Ethan, what was that? What evidence?" "Nothing, just..." He was already walking toward the door. "It's late, we should get inside." Nia stood there for a moment longer, watching him retreat, the aurora still dancing overhead. The cold seeped through her layers, but it was nothing compared to the chill of confusion and hurt spreading through her chest. Something was wrong. She'd known it for days, had chosen to ignore the encrypted files and mysterious transmissions, but she couldn't ignore this. Whatever Ethan was hiding, it was big enough to make him pull away just when they were about to. She didn't let herself finish that thought. Instead, she followed him inside, where the warmth did nothing to chase away the sudden coldness between them. 3 days of Ethan avoiding her was 3 days too many. Nia had tried patience, had tried giving him space, had tried direct questions that he deflected with practiced ease. Nothing worked. He was polite, efficient, and distant, the stranger from the first day back in full force. She was done with patience. The restricted engineering corridor had bothered her since the first time she'd seen it. Now, standing in front of the sealed door at 2 in the morning, Nia told herself she was just being thorough. A good scientist investigated anomalies. That's all this was. The lie felt thin even to her. The emergency override codes weren't hard to guess. She'd watched Ethan punch in similar sequences a dozen times. After 3 tries, the lock clicked open. The room beyond was filled with servers humming in the darkness, screens glowing with data streams and schematics. Nia's training kicked in automatically, her eyes scanning the displays, even as her hands trembled slightly. What she saw made her blood run cold. Her research data, all of it, copied, cataloged, and flagged with one word in red letters: deletion pending. She scrolled further. Weather manipulation technology, storm generation systems, files labeled Project Coldfront, Bioengineered Storm System, test parameters, projections showing the storm that had trapped them here, not a natural disaster, but an engineered one. Nia, she spun around to find Ethan standing in the doorway, his face pale in the blue glow of the monitors. "You caused this." Her voice shook. "This storm. You made it happen, and you're deleting my research, my life's work." Each word felt like spitting out broken glass. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Ethan didn't deny it, That almost made it worse. "It's not what you think, then explain it to me," Naya's shout echoed in the small room. "Explain how you looked me in the eye for 3 weeks while planning to destroy everything I've worked for. Explain how you held me during that storm, made me trust you, and all the while—" "You weren't supposed to be here," the words burst out of him. "The evacuation was supposed to be complete. Every civilian scientist off the base before the test. You staying wasn't part of the plan." "So what? I'm just collateral damage?" "No." Ethan moved closer, and Naya forced herself not to back away. "No. If you'd just left with everyone else, none of this would have happened. But I didn't leave. I'm here. So now what?" The silence stretched between them, filled with all the things they'd almost said, almost done, almost become. "Now," Ethan's voice was hollow. "Now I have to figure out how to keep you safe while finishing a mission I'm starting to hate." "Don't," Nia's hands clenched into fists. "Don't you dare act like you're protecting me. You lied to me, used me, made me think—" She couldn't finish, wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing how deep the hurt went. She pushed past him and out of the room, leaving him standing alone among the evidence of his betrayal. The base felt smaller, somehow, now that they were avoiding each other. Naya took her meals early or late, timing them to miss Ethan. She worked in her lab with the door closed, buried herself in salvaging what data she could from local backups. The storm picked up again on day 23. Not as bad as before, but enough to make the base shudder and groan. Naya told herself it was natural, just weather. But she couldn't shake the image of those schematics, the evidence that even nature could be weaponized. She didn't sleep well. In the darkness, her mind replayed every conversation, every touch, every moment she'd thought they were growing closer. How much had been real? How much had been manipulation? The worst part was that some traitorous part of her didn't care. Some part still remembered the warmth of his arms, the rare smile, the glimpse of someone lonely and hurting beneath the stoic mask. She hated that part of herself most of all. On day 24, a minor structural breach sealed off part of the eastern corridor. Not critical, the automated systems assured them. But Nia saw it as the omen it was. The base was failing, piece by piece, under the assault of an artificial storm. How long before something major gave way? She caught glimpses of Ethan on security feeds. She'd figured out how to access them from her lab terminal. He looked tired, his face gaunt. He spent hours in the control room, staring at screens, occasionally speaking into his radio in terse, clipped sentences. Once, she saw him standing outside her door, hand raised as if to knock, before he turned and walked away. When Naya found Ethan in the communal area at dinner, she told herself it was because they needed to discuss supply rationing. The food was running low, and like it or not, they had to coordinate. That's what she told herself. "We need to talk about inventory," she said, sitting down across from him. "Agreed." Ethan pushed a data pad across the table. "I've been tracking usage. We have maybe 2 weeks left if the storm doesn't let up." They discussed numbers and rations with careful professionalism, but the real conversation hung unspoken in the air between them, heavy as the ice pressing down around the base. "Let me explain," Ethan said finally. "I don't want to hear it." "I need you to hear it." He leaned forward, urgent now. "The corporation I work for, they developed climate intervention technology, supposed to be controlled, reversible, a tool to prevent disasters, not cause them. And instead, the storm exceeded all projections. It's bigger than predicted, lasting longer than the models showed." His hands gripped the edge of the table. "My orders now are to destroy evidence of the test, any research that could expose the project. Your data on ice formation could prove the storm is artificial." "So I'm acceptable loss?" Nia heard her voice go cold. "My work, my reputation, maybe my life if the base fails, all acceptable to protect corporate profits." "No, I was going to fake your data deletion, make it look complete but keep copies hidden. But if they find out I didn't follow through—" Nia laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "So you're a hero now? Is that what you're telling me?" "I'm telling you I'm trying to fix this, to protect you. By lying," she grabbed her mug, nearly empty, and threw it, not at him, but close enough. It shattered against the wall, shards skittering across the floor. "By making me complicit in my own erasure, you let me trust you. You made me—" She stopped, swallowing the rest. "Made me fall for you. made me think this meant something, made me believe I wasn't alone. I know. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. I know what I did, and I know sorry doesn't fix it, but I'm trying to make this right. There is no making this right. Nia stood, her chair scraping harsh against the floor. The Ethan I thought I knew doesn't exist. He was just another lie. She walked out, leaving him alone with the broken mug and the truth neither of them could escape. The transmission came through at 0600, harsh and clear through the restored communications array. Nia heard it from her lab, Ethan's voice, tense and defensive, arguing with someone on the other end. She shouldn't listen. It was none of her business now, but her feet carried her toward the communications hub anyway. Storm window closing earlier than projected, a crisp voice was saying. Extraction possible in 48 hours. Mission completion must be confirmed before retrieval. Confirmed how? Ethan asked. Data destroyed. Witness debriefed and contained. The way the voice said contained made Nia's skin crawl. She'd heard enough euphemisms in corporate speak to know what that meant. Define contained, Ethan said, his voice dangerously quiet. Dr. Mbele poses a significant liability. Her testimony could expose the entire project. The Arctic is a dangerous place, Walker. Accidents happen, exposure, equipment failure, structural collapse. No, the single word cut through the transmission like a blade. Then you'll handle it personally. Non-disclosure agreements, legal containment, whatever it takes. But she cannot leave this base as a free agent. Are we clear? Crystal, Ethan said and cut the connection. Nia stood frozen in the hallway. They were going to make her disappear. An accident in the Arctic, tragic and impossible to investigate thoroughly, or they'd bury her under legal threats and non-disclosure agreements until she couldn't speak without risking everything. How much did you hear? She jumped. Ethan stood in the doorway of the communications room, looking 10 years older than he had 3 days ago. Enough. Nia's voice was surprisingly steady. They're going to kill me. They're going to try. Ethan moved toward her and she didn't back away. I won't let them. Why should I believe anything you say? Because I'm about to commit career suicide to prove it. He gestured toward the communications room. Come on, I have something to show you. The server room hummed with electronic life as Ethan pulled up screen after screen of data, not just her research, everything. Project Coldfront in its entirety, the failed safety protocols, the casualty projections, the corporate decision to proceed despite the risks. What are you doing? Nia asked. Encrypting all of this and uploading it to an external network. Journalists, environmental agencies, international regulators. His fingers flew across the keyboard. If we're going down, we're taking them with us. You'll lose everything, your job, your reputation. They'll prosecute. I know. He didn't stop typing. I've known for 3 days, been stalling, trying to find another way. There isn't one. Nia watched him work, saw the grim determination in the set of his jaw, and felt something crack in the wall of anger she'd built around her heart. Why? The question came out softer than she intended. Why now? You could have done this from the beginning. Ethan's hands stilled on the keyboard. He turned to face her fully. Because 3 weeks ago, this was just a job, a mission, abstract consequences for abstract people. He paused. Then you stayed. And suddenly none of it was abstract anymore. You still lied to me. I did. I was a coward. He didn't look away from her steady gaze. I told myself I was protecting you by keeping you ignorant. Really, I was protecting myself from having to choose between the mission and you. The word hung in the air between them. Did any of it mean anything? Nia asked, the question she'd been afraid to voice. Or was I just part of the job? You were never part of the job. The words came out fierce, almost angry. You were the part that broke me out of it. I started caring by day 3. Every moment since has been agony, wanting to tell you, being too afraid of losing whatever we were building. So you lost it anyway. I know. He turned back to the screens. I should have told you. Should have trusted you. The base shuddered violently, cutting him off. Alarms began to blare, red lights flashing in the corridors. What is that? Nia grabbed the edge of the desk as another shudder ran through the structure. Ethan was already pulling up structural diagrams. The eastern support wall. It's failing. How bad? Bad. His face went pale. The ice tunnels are flooding. If that wall goes, half the base goes with it. They stared at each other for a frozen moment, hearing in the silence all the things they'd left unsaid. "Finish the upload," Nia said. "I can't leave you." "I'm not asking you to leave me. I'm asking you to finish what you started." She grabbed his arm. "That data is the only leverage we have. Upload it. I'll start emergency protocols up here." "Nia, we're in this together, remember?" She managed a small, sad smile. "Isn't that what you said?" Another shudder. The base groaned like a wounded animal. "Go," Ethan said, and their fingers brushed as she turned away, a ghost of the touches they'd shared, the warmth they'd found. It might be the last time they touched at all. The world became water and ice and darkness. Nia had made it to the emergency supply cache when the eastern wall finally gave way. The sound was like the earth splitting open, a crack of breaking ice magnified 1,000 times. Then rushing water, freezing cold, surging through corridors that had been dry moments before. She ran, but the flood was faster. The tunnel ahead collapsed, ice and metal and water forming an impassable barrier. Behind her, the passage she'd come through was already waist-deep in water. She was trapped. Nia's radio crackled. "Nia! Nia! Where are you?" Ethan's voice ragged with panic. "Eastern Corridor, Section 7. She forced herself to sound calm even as the water rose around her. "The tunnel collapsed. I can't get through." "I'm coming to get you. Hold on." "No, Ethan, no, you need to finish the upload. That's what matters." "Fuck the upload." She'd never heard him yell before. "Tell me where you are, exactly where you are." She gave him coordinates, checking her equipment through fingers that were already going numb from the cold. The water was chest deep now. Her leg throbbed where it had caught between fallen support beams. "Ethan," she said quietly, if you can't, don't." His voice broke. "Don't you dare say goodbye to me." "Then hurry," she said, and tried to laugh. It came out as more of a sob. The radio went silent except for static. The water kept rising. Nia closed her eyes and thought of sunlight on the ocean in Cape Town, of her father's laugh, of the way Ethan's face had looked in the aurora light, like he was seeing something miraculous. Somewhere above her, through tons of ice and metal, she heard a sound that might have been her name, screamed into the void. The water had risen past her shoulders when Nia made a choice: stop waiting for rescue and rescue herself. She'd spent years studying ice, understanding its structure, its weaknesses, its secret passages. The glaciology knowledge that seemed so academic in a classroom became survival skill in the darkness. Somewhere in the flooded warren of tunnels, there had to be another way through. She took a deep breath, maybe her last, and dove under. The water was so cold it felt like knives in her lungs. Her headlamp cut through the murky darkness, illuminating passages that led nowhere, dead ends and collapsed sections. But there, a gap in the ice wall, narrow and jagged, leading to what might be another tunnel system. It was barely wide enough to fit through, and her trapped leg screamed in protest as she pulled it free from the debris. But she squeezed into the opening, pulling herself forward with hands that barely functioned anymore. She emerged into an air pocket, gasping, and kept moving through a crystalline cavern she'd never seen on any map of the base. Ancient ice formations surrounded her like a frozen cathedral, beautiful, deadly. Her radio had died in the water, but she could hear something else, a sound like digging, like something heavy being moved. She followed it through passages that grew warmer toward a light that seemed impossible, and nearly collided with Ethan coming around a corner. They stood frozen for a moment, staring at each other like they weren't quite real. Ethan's hands were bloody, his face streaked with ice and exhaustion. He looked like he'd been trying to dig through the ice itself with his bare hands. He probably had been. "You're alive," he said, his voice completely hollowed out. "So are you." Nia swayed, and suddenly Ethan was there, catching her before she fell, lowering them both to the icy floor. "I thought I lost you," he said into her hair. "I thought I lost you." "You almost did." Nia let herself lean into him, let herself take the comfort of his warmth against the bone-deep cold. "I had to save myself." "I know." His arms tightened around her. "I know. But I would have dug through this entire fucking base to find you." They sat there in the ice cathedral, two people who'd survived the impossible, holding onto each other like lifelines. Outside the storm, inside the storm, nothing mattered except this: they were alive. "The upload?" Nia asked finally. Finished. It's out there. Can't be taken back now. Ethan pulled back enough to look at her. They're going to come after both of us for this. Then they come after both of us. Nia met his eyes. Together, right? Together, he agreed, and it sounded like a vow. The helicopter that arrived 36 hours later wasn't the corporate extraction Ethan had been promised. The team that rappelled down wore the insignia of the International Environmental Agency, and their first words were, "Are you Ethan Walker and Dr. Nia Mbele?" "Who's asking?" Ethan stepped forward, deliberately placing himself between Nia and the strangers. "People who received a very interesting data packet 2 days ago." The team leader pulled off his helmet. "We've been investigating Project Coldfront for 6 months with no hard evidence. You just handed us everything we needed." They were rescued. They were safe. They were about to become the center of an international scandal that would take years to resolve. As the helicopter lifted off, Nia looked back at the base, her prison, her crucible, the place where everything had broken and reformed into something she didn't have words for yet. "You okay?" Ethan asked quietly. "Ask me later." She laced her fingers through his, no longer caring who saw, who knew. "When we're somewhere warm." At the extraction point, men in suits were waiting with lawyers and legal documents and 1,000 questions. Ethan faced them all, his hand never leaving Nia's. "Whatever happens next," he said, for her ears only, "I want you to know. I'd do it again, all of it, even knowing how it ends." "It hasn't ended yet," Nia said. Then, louder, to the lawyers, "We'll testify, everything, but we do it together, or we don't do it at all." The investigators exchanged glances. The lawyers frowned, but in the end, they agreed. Maybe they recognized what Nia already knew. Together, she and Ethan were stronger than the sum of their parts. Truth had a funny way of becoming powerful when people were brave enough to speak it. Cape Town in May was golden and warm, a world away from Arctic ice. Nia stood outside the courthouse where they'd spent the last 3 months testifying, breathing in air that smelled like ocean and flowers instead of ozone, and cold metal. "You coming?" her colleague asked, holding open the car door. "In a minute. I'm waiting for someone." She saw him before he saw her, Ethan, walking down the courthouse steps, looking uncomfortable in a suit that fit too well. He'd cut his hair. She kind of missed the shaggy length, but she understood the need for reinvention. They'd both been remade by fire and ice. Their eyes met across the crowded sidewalk. Neither smiled. It wasn't that kind of moment, but Nia felt something warm unfurl in her chest anyway. "Hey," he said, reaching her. "Hey, yourself." She studied his face, the new lines around his eyes, the careful way he held himself. "You testifying again tomorrow?" "Yeah, you?" "Not until Wednesday." They were dancing around it, the thing neither had been brave enough to name. "I was thinking, if you're free, maybe we could—" "Yes," Ethan said immediately. I didn't finish the sentence. "Doesn't matter. Whatever it was, yes." This time, Nia did smile. "Walk on the beach? I haven't shown you the good parts of Cape Town yet." They walked along the coastline as the sun set, painting the ocean in shades of amber and rose. It should have been romantic. It was romantic, but it was also real. They talked about the trial, about what came next, about the uncertainty of rebuilding careers from scandal. "I don't know what this is," Ethan admitted as they reached a quiet stretch of sand. "We started under impossible circumstances. So we start over." Nia took his hand, the same hand that had been bloodied digging through ice to find her. "Honestly, this time." "Okay." Ethan stopped walking, turned to face her fully. "Hi, I'm Ethan Walker. I'm a former corporate engineer trying to figure out how to be a decent human. I'm probably going to mess this up, but I'd like to try anyway, if you'll let me." Nia Mbele, glaciologist, claustrophobic, terrible at trusting people, but working on it. She smiled. "I think we can figure it out. We survived the Arctic. This should be easy." "Nothing about you is easy," Ethan said, but he was smiling too. "Good. Easy is boring." They walked further, talking and laughing and sometimes just being quiet together, which was its own kind of conversation. The ocean rolled beside them, endless and patient, and above them the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Not an aurora, but beautiful in their own constant way. "I want to show you something." Nia said when they reached her apartment. She led him to her small home laboratory where ice core samples sat preserved in special freezers, each one labeled with coordinates and dates. "This is what we saved," she said, touching one of the containers. The ice inside was crystal clear, holding within it thousands of years of history. "It's beautiful," Ethan said, then quieter. "And this is what we're building." He gestured between them, and Nia understood. Not just the ice cores, not just the truth they'd exposed, but this, them. Whatever they were, becoming. "No guarantees," she warned. "I don't need guarantees, I just need honest." He took her hand again. "Can you give me that?" "Yeah," Nia said, "I think I can." They didn't kiss then. That would come later, in its own time, when they were both ready. Instead, they stood in the warm Cape Town night, two people who'd been broken and frozen and tested, who'd survived by choosing truth over comfort, together over alone. The ice had been their crucible, burning away everything false until only the essential remained. What they built from here wouldn't be perfect, but it would be real. And real, they'd both learned, was worth every impossible, terrifying, beautiful risk.